Hey, it's Dr. Charles, aka CoachMD, having all kinds of technical issues. Uh, but anyway, I'm here live, Facebook Live on a magical Monday broadcast. Uh, why do I do these things? I'm a medical doctor, as many of you know, and I really position myself and define myself or recognize myself as a holistic physician. What does that mean? What does holistic mean? Well, to some of you, it may mean I'm into alternative medicine or integrative medicine. But for me, the definition of holistic is approaching life, approaching myself, approaching my patients in a holistic way, in mind, body, and spirit. And in order to get true health and wellness, I find that we need to balance all of those aspects. And in my practice, in my personal practice, in my professional practice, I focus on that. And I want all of you to recognize that that's where I'm coming from. And hopefully it's a message that you welcome and you learn from, and you can share with me your ideas and your thoughts. And also share with me where you're from. I love to know all about where you're from. Everybody has a personal life journey experiences, and on these Magical Monday broadcasts, I like to do them on Monday to start the week off on a positive foot. So we look for those magical events in our daily lives that keep us motivated, that keep us inspired, that keep us going on. So Monday doesn't have to be a bad day or a day that we really don't look forward to. So I'm very happy. I'm just going to look at a couple comments just to make sure that I was getting notified that that I needed to rotate my phone. So I'm hoping I am upright and not sideways while you're viewing this. So anyway, okay. What I'd like to talk to you today about is, what do we do when we're faced with something that we have no control over? And what's a great example of that is our birth order. We have no choice of who our parents are going to be. That is up to something that we have that's much larger than us. And also birth order, I've thought about a lot, and it does influence the way we live our lives, the way we view our lives, and our personal perspective. It doesn't have to be. If we become aware, and through introspective self-knowledge and self-honesty, we could understand where it's coming from, our viewpoints, our perspective. So let me give you an example of a first child. Are you or anyone you know firstborn? What does it mean to be firstborn? Well, to your parents, to most parents, it's a wonderful thing, welcoming in a blessing, a new birthing, a new life. It's such a special feeling. I know how I felt and my wife felt when we had our first son. But what is it for the child who's born? Well, it could be it can be very, very beautiful also. And if you're an only child, that you may not experience the birth of a sibling. But it's the birth of that sibling, that second child, that affects so much the perspective and the outlook and the life experience of the firstborn child. Now, how would that be? Well, a good friend of mine shared with me a personal experience that he had with his firstborn. And it was, his firstborn, and then they had a second child. And the first child was really acting out a lot. And I'm talking about when they're 2 and 3. I'm not talking about adult children. I'm talking when they're young, maybe 1 or 2, or maybe I think the older child was maybe 1.5 or 2, and then they had the second child. And the first child was acting out a lot, right? So this person went to the pediatrician and asked if the pediatrician could give them any advice. And the pediatrician looked at him and said, I'll say Joe, my friend Joe. Okay, Joe, just picture it this way. You go home to your wife one night, and on your arm is another woman. Let's call her Jane. And you say to your wife, oh, honey, I love you, but here's Jane, and I love her too. And Jane's going to come and live with us, and we're going to be a happy family. Well, that's kind of what it's like to the firstborn child. When you bring another child into the world, their world is turned upside down because they were the center of your universe. And many times that firstborn child doesn't get over the birth of the second child. throughout your whole life if you don't become aware, because it is a threat to love from your parents. And there's another, I was over some friend's house years ago, and their younger son was just starting to walk with a wide-based gait, just walking. And his older sister came behind him and shoved him down. Yeah, you just shoved him down. And I'm thinking to myself, what kind of kid is this? And this was, of course, before I had children. Then I understand the dynamics of children. They don't think about it. They're reacting. Again, they're reacting to the danger, threat, and vulnerability of losing love from their parents. Another example, another friend of mine, a lot of friends with children, when their child was, when they had their second child, their first child, they had gotten a doll to, as a present. And one morning they went into their son's room in his crib, and they saw this doll torn to shreds. And they looked, aghast. What happened? And the child pointed at it and said the name of the new baby. So this is not an evil child. This is not some a child that's been taken over by the devil. No, this is a normal experience. And this doesn't have to be just your pecking order where you've been born into but it does influence things that happen in our lives that we have no control over, have such a profound influence on how we live our lives and what happens with us as we get older and our life's journey. But it doesn't have to be that way. If you have self-knowledge, self-honesty, and introspection, all of those things, when you try to grow and develop and get better, it's about recognizing and being honest about the effect that certain instances had in our life. Now, if we break down, as I like to look at things through the perspective of the automatic brain, as I call it, and this brain only has two reactions, fight or flight. And the fight or flight occurs when we take in anything that may make this brain process that we're in danger, threat, or vulnerable. And the loss of love is one of the biggest dangers that we will fight and flee not to lose love. And that is innate. That is in the child. That is why the child behaves that way. And that's why as you grow older, that's why you may behave in certain relationships that way. Because of that danger, threat, of vulnerability of losing love. But guess what? That is a primitive instinct, actually. Now, we all talk about love as being some higher form of communication and connection. Yes, it is. But the loss of love is primitive. The fear of losing love is different from giving love. The fear of losing love is actually security built in. It's our fear of losing security. So when you have the famous experiment, when you have a primate, a gorilla, who the child is taken away, the young baby gorilla is taken away from its mother. And that young gorilla, no matter how much you give that gorilla, no matter how much food and nurturing and safety you give that gorilla is going to wither and get to near death because of its loss of love. It's innate that we will fight for that because the security of our parents, of our mother, especially, that nurturing is so important. And losing that love is a big threat, is innate, that we will fight and flee to hold on to it. But again, it's only security. Our higher self, our divine nature, connects with true love. Now that's a lot different. And that is unconditional. That is not dependent. It's not codependent. It's independent. But, however, we have no control over what certain things happen to us, like where we're born into, if we're a first child or second child or a third or fourth, whatever. We have no control over that. But what we do have control over as we get older, not as a child really, but as we get older, we can look back and we could see, how is that affecting my life? How is that maybe holding me back? How is that influencing my relationships now? How is that causing me to fight or flee maybe things that are actually good for me? And it may come down to the fact that all along we felt that we were going to lose that love and security. And we are really, as adults, our brain, the automatic brain, our primitive nature, that animalistic nature, will stop developing around from birth to adolescence, roughly. And it has laid down the framework of what we are going to view as adults, what we're going to view as danger or threat. So think about that. Now you're maybe 30, 40, 50, or 60, and you still have that framework in you of that childish brain that has been formulated to try to figure out what is going to take so you can preserve and hold on to love really as a security mechanism, not as something to help you grow, but something to protect you. But in all, you have this higher power, this higher nature in you, which is the culmination of your gifts and talents and strengths, your innate abilities. That is your true strength. That is all you need. You really don't need that of somebody else. So when you're going on your week and you are faced with circumstances that are out of your control, understand that first of all, it's part of your journey. And second of all, you have the innate gifts and talents to be able to take a step back and to view them from a logical and not a emotional. And here's the kicker here. When I talk about this woo-woo stuff, divine nature, higher power, whatever, and a lot of people get turned off by that because they say, well, I live in the physical material world. Well, guess what? When you are logical, when you are grounded in that physicality, when you are grounded, well, not the physicality, but when you are grounded in the laws of logic, those laws of logic actually free you up to understand what your divine nature is. And when I say the laws of logic, it means maybe simply of writing down a pro and a con list of any circumstances you may be facing. And that helps solidify it. There was a philosopher many, many years ago, around 550 BC, I think around then, Pythagoras. And Pythagoras was a Greek philosopher. Many of you may know Pythagoras and the Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. But you might be surprised that Pythagoras was actually much more of a spiritual person. And he was more of a philosopher, more of a spiritual guide and leader than he was a philosopher. Now, more of you may have heard of Plato than you've heard of Pythagoras. Well, Plato was a Pythagorean. And it was Pythagoras' theory that once we understand our physical world, and as I say, we need to have both feet grounded before we can firmly fixed and grounded on this physical earth before we can reach for the stars. And Pythagoras said it a different way. He said that once we can organize our world in a logical way, and we can understand our physical world, then we can reach beyond it. And he had this idea of what's called transmigration of the souls, where our souls can enter into other souls as we're all one, which is not so different from many of the major religions. And this was going back about 500 years BC. So it's very interesting that when we take this idea of the fact that our primitive brain is structured for the first 12 or so years of our life, yet we're carrying it around through our adult lives. And then we use that as our benchmark or our barometer of how we're supposed to deal with our life, instead of looking at who we really are, our gifts, our talents, our strengths, our innate abilities, which is really part of our divine nature. And the way we free that up is to understand that we could apply simple logic to those things. And by simple logic, we can dispel all the fake news stories that our brain tells us. And a little plug for my ebook, Fake News Stories by Your Brain. Definitely look for it, read it, let me know what you think about it. And by doing that, you can join my Facebook group, which I just started, a private Facebook group, but for only those who have read the ebook, only because there are going to be topics discussed in that group which are all about this idea of automatic brain and losing love and security and all that. But anyway, getting back, so as you go forward this week, I want you to understand that you are truly in control, even of those things that seemingly are out of your control. They are out of your control, but when you structure it, when you take a step back, apply the logic organized and instigated by your divine nature, your mind, rather than your automatic brain, you will see how things fall into place. And how do you know what's your brain and what's your mind? Your mind will never make you anxious. Your divine nature will never make you nervous. What makes you nervous is that fight or flight that we all get, me very much included. How do you think I could talk about this stuff or write about it if I didn't experience it? So believe me, I know where you're coming from. We all have different experiences. All our life's journey are different, but the bare bones of what we're made out of is all the same. So anyway, have a great week. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Dr. Charles, aka CoachMD, bringing you another installment of my Magical Monday Facebook Live broadcast. I'd love to hear where you're from, what you thought about this, and look forward to continuing connecting as the days and weeks go by. So until then, I'm Dr. Charles, aka CoachMD, signing off. I love you and God bless you. Bye for now.